Hey guys, I'm Andrea Dunlop, and today I'm going to be talking about American Dirt. So far in this series, I've talked about what a sensitivity reader is and when you might need one, some of the controversy around the practice, and I've gotten into 4 case studies that came up again and again. So as I mentioned, those were happening in the YA space, and I was not really necessarily tuned into them at the time, so I was mostly kind of recapping them. But this scandal, however, with American Dirt that happened earlier this year, I was following really breathlessly, like a lot of us. This is the first kind of scandal of this magnitude that we've had around this topic in the adult world. So today I'm going to do something a little bit different, which I'm calling a new feature I'm calling Monday Morning Publicist. Who knows how many times I'll do it, but basically while this was going on, I just kept thinking about 2 questions. What would I tell Jeanine Cummings if I was her publicist? And what would I do if I was this author? So because I think this is a hugely instructive case, I'm going to attempt to answer those questions today. So now I should say, of course, hindsight is 2020. I'm not saying I have all the answers for something like this. This was a really complicated situation, but nonetheless, I think it can be a really interesting exercise. Okay, so I'm going to first attempt to kind of recap what happened in case you missed it, or in case you just don't remember it because January 2020 feels like about 1,000 years ago. But at any rate, this book came out January 21st, 2020. This novel by Jeanine Cummings is about a Mexican bookseller who is forced to flee her home in Acapulco with her young son and head for the border after her journalist husband is murdered by a cartel that he has been covering. So the hype surrounding this book was absolutely deafening. It got breathless blurbs from just everyone that you could possibly hope to blurb a book, really. Stephen King, Ann Patchett, Sandra Cisneros, who called it the great novel of Las Americas, and Dawn Winslow, who called it no less than a grapes of wrath for our times. So this book went to auction. There was something like 9 publishers bidding over it. It got a 7-figure advance. And it was basically just given every piece of marketing push that a book could possibly get. It was an early favorite with booksellers, and things truly hit a fever pitch when it was named Oprah's book club pick, which is, of course, basically the best thing that can ever happen to a book. Okay, so the backlash to the book kicked off with a scathing review by Mexican-American writer Miriam Gurba, and a very negative review from David Bowles. So this was about a month before the book came out. So these reviews didn't actually get that much attention at first, but the conversation kind of got brought back up and kind of hit full throttle after Oprah made her book club pick, and a bunch of Latinx celebrities, including Salma Hayek, were posting about the book. Now, I really could go on for hours kind of recapping every single part of this scandal. I read just about everything that I could find on this book, really went down the rabbit hole. I used my Apple TV Plus, free trial week of subscription to watch the Oprah Roundtable. The Latinx authors they brought on for the panel were great, but I found the whole thing just a little bit tepid, to be honest. So I'm going to do a comprehensive roundup of everything I read on my blog. But if you listen to just one thing about this book, I highly recommend it be Maria Hinojosa's Latino USA interview with some of the major players, including Cummings. It's truly one of the most compelling pieces of radio I've heard in a long time, and probably the best summary of everything that happened with this book. Okay, so here are kind of the key points of the backlash. The first was just the author's identity. So critics claim that Cummings had sort of identified herself previously as white. They refer to a 2015 op-ed in the New York Times where she notes that though she has a Puerto Rican grandmother, she is sort of experiences the world as a white person. And then she sort of changed this, her critics say, or in pre-publication to identify as white and Latinx. And she does say in the author's note that she wishes someone, quote, browner than her had written this book. That led to a lot of criticism and leads me to believe that she did anticipate some of the blowback. There was also criticism that the publisher mentioned her, or in sort of the pre-publication lead up, they identified Cummins as the wife of an previously undocumented immigrant, which people felt was misleading because her husband, though he was undocumented at one point, is from Ireland. Okay, so the second point was just kind of the positioning of the book. So this book was not labeled as a book about the border, but as the book about the border. And of course, it's by a white writer. So the publisher introduced the book in the many copies of The Galley that went out, the sort of the copy of the book that goes out for pre-publication readers, as the book giving a face to the faceless. And Jeanine herself used the unfortunate term faceless brown mass to describe kind of how Americans see people at the border. So this kind of led to the assertion that, this was really a book written for white people, or as Ghurba put it, trauma porn wearing a fig leaf of social justice. Just as a side note, Miriam Ghurba is a really talented and funny writer, and I highly recommend checking her out completely outside of this whole scandal. Okay, so the third point was just actually the book itself. So really there was a lot of accusations that this book trafficked in stereotypes, that the author didn't do enough research, which led to some kind of jarring inaccuracies and Spanish malapropisms, and most damning, that the book actually kind of cribbed from a couple of the works that Jeanine cites as inspiration by authors Luis Alberto Urreas and Sonia Nazario. So, okay, the fourth point is just that this whole thing just really brought up kind of publishing's overall treatment of Latinx writers. So Latinx folks only make up 3% of the publishing industry versus 18% of the population, so really underrepresented. And Latinx writers are routinely told kind of that their stories don't have wide enough reach to merit a big publication of this magnitude or to be published at all. So Luis Alberto Urrea, who I mentioned, was one of the sort of inspirations for this work, says he was rejected for 10 straight years and got feedback like nobody cares about starving Mexicans and no American reader is going to read a book with a surname as strange as yours. So this was in the 90s, but plus ça change, as they say. So I want to emphasize here that no one, at least not that I read, said that Jeanine Cummins should not have tried to write a book about Mexico or the border, just that she missed the mark. Okay, so in the end, the publisher did respond to the controversy. They canceled Jeanine's 40-city books tour, citing safety concerns. There was a lot of blowback actually for that because people felt that was sort of implying that somehow the Latinx literary community was somehow more dangerous, and they didn't get super specific about what those threats were. And they did apologize for the serious mistakes they made in positioning the book. And I know folks from the publisher met with Dignidad Literarias, which was a group that included Ghurba to sort of address some of these concerns. I don't know what came of that. Obviously, right after this happened, the pandemic broke out. And now at this moment, publishers are sort of newly reckoning with their issues with race and sort of diversity and fairness. So we will see kind of what comes of that.